Agitorium nostrum, in nomine Domini. We're picking up with Immortale Dei of Pope Leo XIII. We saw how he talked about freedom of the press, freedom of thoughts, freedom of thoughts, meaning anyone can teach whatever they darn well please. And that's a disaster. That's a disaster. You just look at today's world with these criminals going into the libraries teaching children that it's okay for men to dress like women and women like men. It's horrifying. But that's the result of this false opinion, freedom of thoughts, understood correctly. It's understood correctly. So let's pick up. Tony, but it is page 29, first paragraph. But it
easily appears that the church is driven into an evil position by the things above, put forth for the foundations of the republic, which are greatly approved by this time. For when the course of things agrees with doctrines of this type, a place in the state equal with those societies alien to her, or even a lower place, is assigned to the Catholic name. No justification in the ecclesiastical laws can be had. The church, which by the command and mandate of Jesus Christ must teach all nations, is commanded to touch nothing of the public establishment of the people. Concerning those things which are of mixed right, they establish governors through themselves for the civil part by their own choice, and in the same matter they proudly look down upon the most holy laws of the church. Why they drag into their own jurisdiction the marriages of Christians, judging even concerning the marital bond and the unity and stability of wedlock. They move the possessions of clerics because they deny that the church may possess its own things. Most seriously, although the church is in the type of a perfect society, her rights having been stripped away, they place her equal to other communities which the republic contains. Because of this reason, if she has something of right, if she has a legitimate faculty for acting, she is said to possess it by the concession and kindness of the princes of the state.
Okay, what's going on here?
He's complaining about the attitude of the statesmen, that they think that they are supreme in every single circle, and the church is subordinate to the state.
Right. So he's saying this is absolutely wrong, that they're treating the state, as a subordinate, as the church as a subordinate to the state. Absolutely. And the church, the state abused this misconception by, in France, they really abused it. They stole all the property of the church. Churches, monasteries were all stolen. Just stolen. Italy also, in the time of Pius IX. Stole them. And then took from the priests even their properties, saying that the church has no right to own property. So huge abuses. Yes.
This is something that happened even to a certain extent during the Middle Ages, right, Father? Where the kings, they thought they would get carried away, and they'd see the priest as, you're my citizens. So
yeah, once in a while there was some abuses like that, but nothing compared to...
nothing compared to what's happened in the last 2 centuries.
In the 1700s on. Yeah. Middle Ages, you got one king who he wants to get in there and make sure his men are elected bishops. So he tries to have an influence, but the church quickly smacks him, puts him in his place. Right? But this is a terrible abuse. And this will all come out at the Day of Judgment as well. How many priests, nuns were driven into exile, put to death by the abuse of the state. In the time of St. John Bosco, the Italian government passed a law against the religious orders, something very big. And St. John Bosco apparently talked to the priest who was responsible for that decision. And St. John Bosco was not happy at all. And he warned him of his eternal demise if he doesn't repent. Read on.
If the church truly has her own right in this republic, with the civil laws themselves approving, and an agreement has been made publicly between each power, they cry in the beginning that the reasons of the church must be dissociated from the reasons of the republic, and for this reason, that it may act against the introduced faith with impunity, and have the judgment of all things with all obstacles removed. The church truly cannot bear it patiently, for she cannot desert her holiest and highest duties, and she asks that the obliged faith be entirely, wholly, and religiously loosed. Often fights are born between the sacred and civil power, of which the end is usually that the one which is less strong in human powers succumbs to the other which is greater.
Right. The state has all the military power. But the church can have military power too. And she still has the shell of that. How?
Swiss Guard.
The Swiss Guards, yeah. They were truly the Pope's army to defend him. That's right. And there was a whole group of young men who came out of Quebec to Pope Pius IX to fight for him. These were young men who were there to defend the Pope because they knew he was being imprisoned and being threatened. So that was very honorable. And Pius IX apparently told them, he was very pleased with the Quebec boys, and he told them, someday the faith will revive along the St. Lawrence River. So let's hope that's true. Go on, Andres, thus.
Thus, in this state of the Republic, which is loved now by so many, the Church is either driven utterly out of the midst, or is held bound and restricted by the ruler. What is done publicly is done in great part for this reason. The laws, the administration of states, the free establishment of new religions, the plundering and the ruin of religious orders, the destruction of the civil leadership of the Roman pontiffs, all things look here, to cut into the nerves of Christian institutions, and to lead the liberty of the Catholic Church to a narrow place, and reduce her other rights.
Yeah, so strip the church of her lawful rights as a perfect and free society, and above the state, not subordinate to it. Read on.
Natural reason itself convicts these statements about ruling the state as being greatly at variance from the truth. For nature itself testifies that whatever anywhere is of power proceeds from God as from the greatest and the most august source. But popular rule, which with no consideration for God is said to dwell in the multitude by nature, so clearly tends to the provision of charms and the flames of many desires, that it rests upon no probable justification. Nor can it have enough strength for the public safety of the restful steadiness of order. In fact, things have bowed so far to it by these teachings that the law is sanctioned by many in civil prudence, that seditions can be inflamed by right. For opinion is strong that the princes of the many are for nothing, but for those things selected which follow the popular will, from which what is necessary happens, that everything is equally changeable with the popular will, and a certain fear of the crowds always threatens.
Yeah, so this whole will of the people, government by the people, for the people, and it's just a recipe of disorder and anarchy, really. Antifa is a proof of that.
But to think about religion that nothing lies between unlike and contrary forms clearly has this end: to not want to test anything in judgment, to not want, open brackets, to test anything, close brackets, in use. But that is from atheism. If it differs in name, it differs nothing in truth. For to those who are persuaded that God exists, unless they wish to stand absurdly with themselves, they understand necessarily that the usual justifications in the divine worship, open parenthesis, of which there is so much difference, and dissimilarity and conflict in even the greatest things, close parenthesis, cannot be equally commendable, equally good, equally accepted by God. So also that faculty of feeling whatever things and of expressing those things in the forms of letters, setting aside all moderation, is not a good in its own proper power in which human society can rightly rejoice, but it is the source and the origin of many evils. Liberty, which is a virtue completing man, must be in itself turned to something true, something good. But the reason of the good and the true cannot be changed for the will of man, but remains always the same, nor is it less unchangeable than the nature of things itself. If the mind assents to false opinions, if an evil will takes up and applies itself to it, neither obtains its own perfection, but both are cut off from natural dignity and will fall down into corruption. Therefore, whatever things are contrary to virtue and truth, it is not just to put in the light and eyes of men, much less defend by the grace or guardianship of the laws. Only a life well spent is the road into heaven to which we all strive. On account of the same thing, the state wanders from the rule and precept of nature if it perversely allows license, opinion, and such deeds to run riot, so that it may with impunity fetch minds away from the truth and lead souls away from virtue.
Okay, I have read better translations. This one seems a little strained, and the translation is not
It doesn't flow.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of mentally follow, but
Yeah, it's not the best translation from the Latin. It's not. But so the Pope is saying here, the state abusing its power can corrupt the masses and abuse the church. Read on, Anthony. It is truly, page 34.
It is truly a great and pernicious error to exclude the church, which God himself has established, from the action of life, from the laws, from the instruction of the youth, and from domestic society.
Okay, there's a powerful sentence right there. It's an error, pernicious, evil. It's to exclude the true church that Christ founded, that God himself established, and separate it from the education of the young, domestic life, from the action from the laws, right? So the Pope is saying this is pernicious, this is evil. Go on, there cannot be
a civilized state taken away from religion. And already that philosophy about life and customs that is called civil is known, perhaps more than is right. What type it is in itself, and in what direction it reaches. The Church of Christ is a true teacher of virtue and guardian of customs. It is she who protects unharmed the principles from which duties are led, and having proposed the most efficacious causes for living honestly, commands not only to flee perverse deeds, but to rule the motions of the soul, which are contrary to reason, even when they are not executed. In truth, to wish that the Church be subjected to the civil power and the function of her own offices is indeed a great injustice, a great rashness. Order is disturbed by this action, because natural things are placed before those which are above nature. It takes away, or certainly greatly reduces, the crowd of goods with which, if it were hindered by no thing, the Church would complete the common life. And furthermore, the way to enmity and struggles is fortified. And events have shown all too often how much ruin can be brought to each republic.
Yes. Not the smoothest translation, but at least you got the Latin. But all right. Okay, Michael, page 35.
Our predecessors, the Roman pontiffs, since they properly understood what the apostolic office asked from them, by no means permitted doctrines of this type, which are not accepted by human reason, and have much in the civil teaching of the moment, to pass with impunity. As Gregory XVI, in the encyclical letter beginning with Maria Vos,
Mirari Vos,
on 15th of August, 1832, with great seriousness of statements, struck down those things which they were already preaching, that no one can invite a selection in divine worship, that to everyone is the right to judge about religion which he prefers, that only his own conscience is a judge. Furthermore, to consume that each person feels, and likewise to labor to fetch new things in the state. The Pope said thus about the things pulling apart the sacred thing and the civil thing. Quote, "Nor are we able to forebode happier things for both religion and the state from the wills of those who wish that the church be separated from the kingdom, and to break apart the mutual harmony of the empire with the priesthood. It makes sense, of course, that harmony, which always stands forth as favorable to civil and sacred things, is very much feared by the lovers of a most shameless liberty." End quote. In a not dissimilar way, Pius IX, as opportunity gave itself, noted many things about these false opinions which had begun to be greatly strengthened, and afterwards he commanded those same opinions to be gathered in one place, that in such a jumble of errors, Catholic men might know that they might follow without offense. It suffices to note a few of them. Proposition 19, the Church is not a true and perfect society, clearly free, nor does she exercise her own proper and consistent rights for herself, brought together by her divine founder, but it is for the civil power to define what the rights of the Church may be, and the limit in which she may exercise those same rights. Proposition 39, the position of the Republic, inasmuch as it is the origin and fount of all rights, exercises by the same right with no limits imposed.
Okay, these are all condemned propositions from the syllabus of errors of Pius IX. So these are all condemned, and he's just repeating them. Go on.
Proposition 55, the Church must be separated from the state, and the state from the Church.
Called?
Separation of Church and state.
Yeah. Is that praised and blessed by the Church?
No.
Is it condemned by all the popes up to Pius XII?
Yes.
Was it taught at Vatican II?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it canonized and elevated as a church teaching at Vatican II?
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Can't remember what document touched on it.
So does approving separation of church and state and condemning separation of church and state, are they the same thing?
No.
So can the Holy Ghost approve separation of church and state for many centuries and then condemn it
No.
after
Unless
Vatican II?
he's schizophrenic.
Can the Holy Ghost contradict himself?
No.
Can he be the spirit of truth and the spirit of contradiction?
No.
No. So either the church has been always right on this point, or Vatican II is right. And Vatican II is wrong, or Vatican II is right, and all the history of the church is wrong. But they both can't be right. So which do you choose to go with? Paul VI, John the 23rd, Francis, Pope Francis, and Pope John Paul II, or all the previous popes
All the previous popes.
and councils. Yeah, it's very serious, right? And these are doctrinal big questions, right? Once you separate church and state, in comes abortion, in comes euthanasia, in comes corruption of youth, in comes all the rotten education and immoral education of the young. And it's endless. It's endless. All right, that's Proposition 55, condemned where?
And the syllabus of errors.
Syllabus, yes. Proposition 79, Guadalupe?
It is false that the state and freedom of whose worship, and likewise that the full power given to all of manifesting any opinions and thoughts, whatever openly and publicly, leads more easily to corrupting the customs and minds of the people, and to indifference, that increasing plague.
It's condemned, yeah. Those who say it's okay, everyone should have freedom of thought, freedom to publish, freedom to teach. It's all going to go okay. But the Pope is saying no, this is condemned. Because it won't go okay, because men have what?
Original sin.
Which means they are prone towards,
Evil.
and most people are going to drink in the poison. Especially pornography today, especially that which is a huge billion-dollar business. Billions and billions and billions of dollars of corrupting the young and the old. It corrupts the old too. Very, very frightful. So the popes are proven right over and over again, these good popes. Go on from these writings.
From these writings of the pontiffs, it must be entirely understood that the rise of the public power is from God himself. It must not be claimed by the multitude. That permitting seditions fights with reason. That it is sinful for private man, it is sinful for states, to count the duties of religion as of no place, or to be in one way in treating different types. That immoderate power of thinking and of openly throwing out thoughts must not be placed among civil rights, nor among things worthy of grace and protection. Similarly, it must be understood that the Church is a society, no less than the state itself, perfect in its type and right, nor must that which has the highest of rule attempt to round up the Church to serve or be subject to it themselves, or permit her to be less free of doing her own things, or take away anything of her other rights, which were brought together in her by Jesus Christ. But in matters of mixed right, it is most suitable according to nature, and likewise according to the counsels of God, not the separation of the one power from the other, and much less tension, but clearly harmony, and agreeing with the nearest causes, which causes give birth to each society.
Yes. Okay. Yes. It's a bit strained, but you're getting the sense. We're going to have a summary of all this, the Church and State teaching, after we finish this, on the Church's teaching from the councils and the papal encyclicals, including this one, Immortale Dei. Read on, Tony.
These things, indeed, are things which are perceived by the Catholic Church regarding the establishing and control of states. However, if one wishes to judge rightly in those things which have been said and decreed, none of the various forms of the Republic are blamed in themselves, as they have nothing which is opposed to Catholic teaching, and they may uphold the state in its best condition, if they are employed wisely and justly. No, indeed, it is not blameworthy in itself that the people are a participant, more or less, in the Republic, because it may, at certain times and for certain laws, pertain not only to the usefulness, but also to the duty of citizens. In addition, no just cause has been borne for which anyone may denounce the Church, either for being more equally restricted in her gentleness and good nature, or an enemy to a liberty that is genuine and lawful. In fact, if the Church judges that the diverse kinds of divine worship are not of the same right as the true religion, she does not then condemn those governors of republics who, either for gaining some other great good, or because of prohibiting evil, bear patiently with customs or use, in order to have each of these have a place in the state. And the Church is also accustomed to greatly beware it, that no one be unwillingly gathered to embracing the Catholic faith. For Augustine wisely warned that man cannot believe except willingly.
Okay, so what is this called when Pope Leo XIII is saying the Church's teaching is only the Catholic Church can be supported by the state? The state must profess the faith. The state must protect the true religion by its laws. But in some cases, the state may tolerate the public worship of false religions to avoid a greater evil, such as civil war. Right? So he's saying the church may have to, in some times, tolerate false religions. But that's called the teaching of toleration. But you tolerate an evil, right, to avoid a greater evil, right? That's what he's saying. You can tolerate, what's an example of tolerating a lesser evil to avoid a greater evil? Well, here it is in the matters of religion with the state. So,
How about a practical one, Father? Wife and husband. The wife is traditional, but the husband still insists on his Novosoro practices. And the wife doesn't want to go to the new mass, but the husband insists on it. You have to come with me. So in order to prevent a quarrel in the marriage that will result in something worse, like the husband just files for divorce or something,
right,
the wife can tolerate having to go but not actively participate.
right, passively. That's a good example. It's an evil, but to avoid a greater evil, she'll tolerate this evil. Tolerate, which is a world of difference from approval.
Right.
And this is the Catholic teaching. This is what Ottaviani was teaching, Cardinal Ottaviani.
So,
And when Cardinal Bea came up with this new doctrine that it is approved, it's praiseworthy that the church and state be separate, that the state be neutral on matters of religion. Approving that, there's a huge world of difference, right? Approving evil as opposed to tolerating it. Do you see?
yes.
It's a fine line, but that was the battle the Archbishop talks about between tradition and the Freemasonic ideas in the church. They clashed with Cardinal Bea and Cardinal Ottaviani. And they duked it out a bit. And Ottaviani just said, this is against all the teaching of the church. And Cardinal Bea said, well, get with it. The church is evolving. So you see,
And even God himself does that. He has his actual will and his permissive will. He allows certain evils to take place.
yeah, that's right. Look at the modern world. He's allowed it to go this far,
Surprisingly.
but to draw the greater good. But he doesn't approve of the evils. He doesn't approve abortion. He doesn't approve all these crimes. But he'll tolerate it in order to bring the saints of these days out. So do you see what Leo XIII is saying here? Very important point, and we'll cover it a little more later, yes?
Oh, I just had a question about the analogy. Because I know it's different because she's the wife versus the husband, but that does reflect on how the children see it. Like, she would have to make her position clear that she's against it. Because otherwise, if she goes and the husband's for it, the kids will grow up and they'll all be for it.
Right.
So sometimes I would think conflict is better than the kids growing up with the approval of the Novosoro.
Well, you have to preserve the marriage unity. That's very important.
You do, but it's a balance, because sometimes what's the point of having it if you're only preserving it? You're preserving it, but you're also showing approval to something.
You wouldn't be showing approval if you go, but you don't participate actively. The children are gonna notice automatically. Mom's not praying with everybody. Mom's not doing this. Mom's not doing that.
Well, I think the point that Michael's bringing out is just that if it's necessary, that the wife just has to make clear to the husband, and if necessary to the children, that this is wrong. I'm not agreeing with this, but I go just for the sake of keeping the peace in the home.
Right, but then
Because the husband has to know.
I understand. No, yes, that's true, but it's not always open conflict is the answer.
No, you don't have to have that. You don't have, because you're probably thinking that it's like a back and forth, but it could just be done very calmly.
And for a time.
Right.
The idea is for a time. Right now, it's a hot subject. She'll tolerate this, But then, she'll get the priest to talk to him and the traditional priest and get him to read and hopefully win him over with prayer and patience. But that's what the church can do this, the state can do this also with false religions. But not approve them. It's a huge world of difference between approval and toleration. And tolerating, how much you tolerate, how long, these are all other questions, right? But toleration is very clearly not approval.
But wouldn't that be worse for the wife to go because that puts her faith in danger? Because wouldn't that be like, in a sense, I know you're trying to keep peace in the home, especially in the married state, but that's kind of the same thing as compromising the faith. It's just would be like kind of how what the resistance does. We don't compromise, right? Because you could say, oh, we just want to make peace with Rome, just as the wife would want to make peace with the father. Because for the sake of the children, if the wife compromises that point and goes to the new mass, and the children go along with, she's putting herself and them in danger.
Right.
So what would be higher?
Well, that's a kind of another question. How much should she? The point is, that makes the example is, it was just an example of toleration. But if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, well, then that's another question. Is it for her? Well, she's strong in the faith. She's not going to cave in. Then it's reasonable that she can take this action for now. And as long as she teaches her children this is evil, we're only going because Dad, da-da-da-da. Is that the best decision, or to make open war? Those are other questions. But on this point, the point was made just to give an example of toleration of a certain evil. So, okay, but that other question will come up in moral theology. All right, read on. Who's going?
For a similar reason, the church cannot approve that liberty which gives birth to a loathing of the most holy laws of God and takes off the obedience owed to legitimate power. For this is more truly licensed than liberty, and called more rightly the liberty of destruction by Augustine, and the cloak for malice, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 16, by the Apostle Peter. No, indeed, when it is contrary to reason, it is true slavery. For whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. John chapter 8, verse 34. Against that is genuine and aspired for liberty, which if it is observed by the private citizen, does not permit man to serve those foul masters, errors and desires. If publicly it stands wisely before the citizens, lavishly supplying the means of increasing reward, and it defends the republic from foreign will. Nevertheless, the church approves this honest liberty, worthy of man, most greatly of all, and never ceases to demand it and bring it forth, steady and whole, among the peoples. In fact, those things can be greatly for the common salvation in the state, those which were established profitably against the licenses of princes, considering evil for the people, those which forbid the highest republic from entering inconveniently into the municipal or domestic sphere. The monuments of earlier ages testify that the Catholic Church has always been either the inventor, the predictor, or the guardian of all those things which prevail for dignity, for the person of man, for conserving the fairness of the law in every citizen. Therefore, agreeing constantly with herself, if from one part she has spat upon an immoderate liberty which falls for both private men and for peoples into license or slavery, from the other, willing and cheerful, she embraces the better things which the days may bring, if they truly sustain the prosperity of this life, which is like a certain study for the other, which will remain forever.
Yeah, I do have a better translation, which we'll cover. This one's pretty rough.
Yeah, it's quite choppy.
It's not smooth. I don't know who made this translation. Consociation of Christ the King, 2024.
It says it at the end.
Somebody born right after William Shakespeare.
Anyway, I do have a better translation, which we'll cover this encyclical again because it's too important to miss out. But read on there, Andres. Therefore,
Therefore, what they say open parenthesis, that the church envies this state for more recent teaching, and that she rejects indiscriminately whatever the nature of these times has produced, close parenthesis, is an empty and barren calumny. Indeed, she rejects madness of opinions. She disapproves the wicked eagerness for seditions, and that habit of minds for naming in which the beginnings of the departing of the willing from God are seen. But because everything which is true must proceed from God, whatever in research touches the truth, the Church recognizes as the very footprint of the divine mind. And although there is nothing of the true in the nature of things which takes away the faith of the divinity which has been handed down, there are many things which do not take away from it. And every invention of the true can derive either knowing or praising to God himself. On that account, the Church will always approach with cheerfulness and rejoicing anything which approaches for advancing the ends of the sciences, and she will favor and cherish those same things eagerly, as she is accustomed, and she does other disciplines which have been placed in the explanation of nature.
So what is true, the church will always support. What is evil and false belief, the church will oppose. And the state should do so also. Go on.
The Church is not against those studies if the mind has discovered something of the new. She does not reject that they may search for many things for the honor and convenience of life. No, indeed, she is the enemy of ignorance and idleness. She greatly wishes that they may bear fertile fruits by cultivation and exercise instilled in men. She presents incentives to every types of arts and works, and directing with her strength and every eagerness in these things to honesty and salvation. She struggles to prevent that intelligence and industry turn man away from God and from heavenly goods. But these things, even if full of reason and of counsel, are less approved in this time when states refuse not only to bring themselves back to the form of Christian worship, wisdom, but even seem daily to wish to depart farther from it. Nevertheless, because the truth brought forth into light is accustomed to flow widely by its own will, and slowly to penetrate the minds of men, therefore we, conscious of our greatest and most holy duty, which is apostolic, which we perform for all the nations, moved by mission, speak out those things which are true, freely, as we must. Not because we have not examined the reason of the times, or because we think that we must repudiate the honest and useful growths of our age, but because we desire firmer foundations and safer journeys of republics away from offenses. And it is for a genuine, unharmed liberty of peoples, for truth is the mother and best guardian of liberty among men. The truth shall make you free. John chapter 8, verse 32.
Okay. Therefore, in such a difficult course of things, if they hear us, as they must, Catholic men will easily see what their duties are. So he comes to the duties of Catholics in this crisis, as much in opinions as in deeds. And indeed, in supposing whatever the Roman pontiffs have passed on or will pass on, it is necessary to hold each one understood with stable judgment, and openly to profess them as often as things will have demanded. Wow, this is a very rough translation, isn't it? But we'll just finish it, and I do have another copy. I'll make copies of that for this encyclical another time. All right, we'll stop there. Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.